Welcome everyone. Hello. My name is Ilaria Parodi of the International Schools team at Pearson, and on behalf of the whole team, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you all and thank you for joining us today to talk about chemistry for the IB diploma program. Very shortly, I will introduce our speakers, but before I do so, I would like to draw your attention to the slide on the screen, which outlines some of the housekeeping rules for today's webinar. One thing to notice is the chat box. Please use the chat box to communicate with us. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please put them in the chat box and we'll aim to resolve them for you. You can also use the chat box for questions. So on today's, if you want to pose questions on today's webinar's topics, there'll be time for questions at the end of the webinar, and we're trying to go through as many questions as you pose then. Today for the Q&A session, my colleague, Dr. Catherine Barber, who's Senior IB Publisher at Pearson, will be joining us. Catherine, not only Catherine is Senior IB Publisher at Pearson, but she's also an IB alumna, so you'll be in very good hands with Catherine. Today's webinar is going to last for about an hour, and it will be recorded, and the recording will be available from our website so that you'll be able to watch it again or share it with your colleagues. And now, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for today, Mike Ford and Oliver Canning. Mike teaches at the École Jean-Emmanuel in Paris. Mike has 30 years in teaching chemistry, physics, and TOK for the IB diploma program. He also has 10 years as an IB coordinator and 20 years working for the IB in a range of roles, including examiner in chemistry and TOK, paper author, workshop leader, senior curriculum coordinator. Mike has been involved with the last 3 curriculum reviews and is father to 3 diploma graduates. Oliver Canning teaches IB chemistry and is the TOK coordinator at TASIS England. In addition to 9 years working in the IB diploma program, Oliver has taught chemistry courses in English, American, and Spanish education systems. Oliver is also a course leader for the educational charity Amala, which works with displaced youth. He was a contributing author to the upcoming chemistry curriculum, as well as developing the accompanying teaching support materials. And now, without further ado, over to you, Mike and Oliver.
Well, good morning, everyone from Central Paris. Just as a way of introduction and see who I'm talking to, it'd be nice if you, in the chat, you just typed in where you're from, which location, and perhaps which books you use at the moment, whether it's the Pearson High Level, the Pearson Standard Level, or both, or indeed neither or none. So just to have some sense of who our audience is, and that'd be good. Okay, so this is a Pearson presentation about the new course. So it's very much from the perspective of 2 people who are quite familiar with it, because we've been working with it, because we've been working on the book for the last year and a half or so. The place to go, though, obviously, for where the official responses and information is the PRC, and they've set it up quite nicely. And here's a slide showing what's there. The guide is clearly there on the left-hand side, and then in the middle you've got information about the collaborative science project. I'll give you more details of that later. And on the right-hand column, we've got assessment, which includes specimen papers as well. In fact, Catherine and we are involved in writing those assessment papers. So it's not an IB workshop, and if you, but if you want to go to an IB workshop, I would give a different presentation. Indeed, I'm doing 2 IB workshops the next 6 weeks, and it'll be very much using IB documentation, whereas today we're going to be focusing on the new changes, but in the perspective of paper authors. So what's new? Effectively, one aim of the review was to do a number of things, and the first thing to look at was reduction in the content. Now, what's happened is the options have gone, although I say the word gone, but some of them are being absorbed into the core and advanced high-level material. So as you can see here on the slide, I've shown that fuel cells, which was in the energy option, option C, is now covered in the reactivity 1.35 part of the course. So the options haven't disappeared. Certainly, I would say that a lot of the unnecessary content in the options has gone, but the interesting applications which add to understandings have been maintained in some cases. A crude measure would be to look at the relative size of the books. The previous high-level book had 980 pages, and it's gone down to 945, which doesn't look of a dramatic cut, but I would say we have made an effort to increase the number of questions, and also I think the course has got more, I would say, breathing space to actually help students make connections between different parts of the course. Oliver, you want to try anything at this stage?
No, yeah, I think you're spot on. Is it? I like the term a little bit more breathing space to try and avoid that frantic rush towards the end of the course to cover everything. And I think, like I said, the page number is one way of looking at it, but definitely if you consider what has been taken from the options and put into the new course, it doesn't equate to a full option as it was in the previous course. So I think you're right. A bit of extra breathing space is a nice way to put it.
Okay, so one other big element is a conceptual approach, which in fact has an approach that is trying to be followed in lots of IB reviews. In this context, in chemistry, we're trying to emphasize the links between different parts of the course. It's a bit ironic as a book author, but I hate it when students say, okay, which chapter are we on? In the sense that it's a linear program. I think students should be looking at the core course as a sort of grid of different ideas which can then interconnect and relate to each other. So that's definitely one difference in the new course, and that's set out in the roadmap, which is effectively divided into structure and reactivity, which I think works quite nicely for chemistry. There is roadmaps in other sciences like biology and physics as well. I think the biology is probably the most radical difference, but the chemistry one I think will look pretty sensible to most chemistry teachers. And teachers are encouraged to make connections between different areas. So you can almost think of this as a web page idea, and you can sort of click a box and then you can go into different areas. So teachers are encouraged to actually not necessarily follow a linear process through the course. Now that might be a little bit daunting at the beginning, but I think it will enrich the course as students' understanding develops. Again, teachers are encouraged to, there's no necessary order of teaching. You're free to teach the course in whatever order you so wish. Okay, so one big change is the fact we have guiding questions at the beginning of each topic. Now these questions are meant to sort of justify why this is worthy of study in the first place to students. So it's an invitation which sets the context of what they'll be studying and justifies why it's worth actually understanding. So each understanding is clearly outlined in the guide, and so you've got your understanding statement. On the left-hand side, you've got some guidance. On the right-hand side, you've got the linking questions. Now, the textbook has actually effectively dealt with each understanding in turn. So whereas the previous book had a range of understandings and dealt with them in one go, we actually have atomized it so that we have the understanding and we've got the relevant text. And then we've got the high-level material, which is clearly identified as an extension material, which is also in the textbook, and it's identified with this HL blue box. So it's very clear to teachers what is high level and what is standard level. So the linking questions. So the linking questions effectively link different parts of the course. So as you can see here, we've got a link between you teaching structure 2.1 or 1.1, forgive me, and there's a link to alloys, which is 2.3. So in the text, you'll see where we're talking about mixtures, and there'll be a link to there'll be a linking question to alloys alongside the text, and that will then encourage students to perhaps have a look at 2.3. And also, linking questions effectively work in both directions. So in looking at alloys, then you'll be reminded about mixtures and perhaps go back to that so that the understanding is deeper and more complete. Again, the intention is to encourage students to have a reflective approach of making connections as the course progresses. They may find it a bit daunting at the beginning, but it'll be a very useful tool for revision and enhancement as the course develops. So there's an example. The other big difference is that the skills that the students will actually, or the skills that the course facilitates, is clearly identified. So again, in choosing chemistry, students they have an understanding of what skills they will develop as they study the course. It's also very useful in terms of for the IB to show to universities that the students who do the IB program will leave the program with these skills. Again, emphasizes that it's not just about understanding, it's about skills as well. Are there anything to chip in at this stage?
No, we're all covered. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so in the textbook we have skills are sort of supported in two ways. One is in the text itself, it'll have a little skills box alongside the text with links, if you can see there with the grey icon, to possible lab work, which is available in the ebook. So here's an example, for example, so 2.4.1, you'll have a link from the book to the ebook, and there are worksheets on labs, and those worksheets include pre-lab questions, equipment lists, post-lab report prompts, again supporting your practical program. Again, at the end of the book, there's actually a chapter devoted to skills in the study of chemistry, where the different skills are actually highlighted in more detail. So again, the students have a very clear idea of what they actually are, should be developing as they go through the course. This also supports the IB in terms of so these skills in the science programs do actually fit in quite nicely to the ATL framework. At the end of each chapter, we revisit the guiding questions, and this is quite useful as a revision tool, because it means that all the points that have been developed in the chapter are actually highlighted by bullet points, and teachers or students actually can download those as PDF files to help them revision at the end of the course as they're preparing for the examinations. Internal assessment. A lot of teachers are very always worried about internal assessment. So the first thing is it's changed its name to the scientific investigation as opposed to the individual investigation. The reason for that is that collaboration, to some extent, is actually allowed. I'll go into more detail what that means in a moment. The assessment criteria have changed. So you've now, personal engagement has gone and communication has gone. The reason they went was that actually, as assessment tools, they weren't very effective because they didn't really differentiate between students. Most students tended to get 1 for personal engagement, and most students tend to get 3 or 4 for communication. So they were effectively very useful for assessment purposes. But some of them have been absorbed into the criteria mentioned below. One thing you may notice is that in terms of weighting, there's quite a heavy weighting now towards the higher level skills of evaluation and conclusion. So students may find the internal assessment more challenging in the sense that the marks will be, there's less easy marks to get, I think. So that's something to look at. I imagine this will change in terms of the grade boundaries can change, of course, to reflect that. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about it getting harder in terms of what we'll get in IB grades at the end, but it just means that what's demanded of the students is more challenging, I think. In the book, there's an internal assessment chapter, and in that chapter we give an internal assessment checklist to help you support the students, make sure that they address the criteria fully. So what do we mean by collaboration? Well, the reason that one issue with schools, and remember that the IB is taught throughout the world in schools of different facilities, different support in terms of lab support, technicians, etc. So for some schools, with classes of 30, having 30 individual investigations was a very pragmatic challenge. So the IB wanted to address this. So there is some element of collaboration in the early stages of the investigation. Students still need to actually have their own individual research question, but they can work together in developing methodologies which we can then apply to answering different research questions. So typically, for example, you might be investigating the rates of reaction of one particular reaction, and students might want to, each individual student within the group may want to investigate concentration or may want to investigate temperature. So the experimental setup would actually be similar. So there's less burden in terms of equipment, and also safety in a sense, if you've got less individual practicals going on at one time. So that was why that has been brought into play. You're not obliged to, you can still, if you prefer, you can still have students work individually, but it's an option which schools may find useful in some contexts. Oliver, anything you'd like to?
Yeah, nothing to add there really, but it will be, I'm interested personally in how people will approach the collaborative work as we kind of move through the new course. Because yeah, as you've just explained, there's kind of more scope for collaboration, but you've got to be a little bit careful looking for kind of making sure they've got kind of unique research questions and things like that. So I'm posing kind of my interest in how people carry this out in the coming year.
Yeah, just worth adding actually that of course these criteria are the same for all the sciences. So I can see this being particularly of particular value to biology teachers who perhaps do field work. So the students work together collecting data and generate like a database from working in different groups. And then from that database, they would then have different research questions. So for biology, I think it would be very helpful. For chemistry, I'm not sure I would necessarily change my approach too radically, or indeed for physics as well. But again, sometimes working in a French school, having large class sizes is a problem, and not having like my own lab all the time makes challenges as well. So in some cases I can see it working and helping out a little bit. Okay, the nature of science is still there, but it's being, I would say, simplified. Well, I wouldn't say simplified, I would say it's being, whereas before there was like a 5-page legal document almost of different statements, 4.1, it's being condensed into 13 or 14 aspects of science. And so we have here just showing observations and patterns and trends. So it's very clear to students, indeed to teachers, what we mean by nature of science. That in the book is addressed by having nature of science boxes, which are in the current book as well. So they're alongside the text. And again, it emphasizes the nature of science and how we actually accumulate knowledge in science, particularly in the context of chemistry. Oliver has written a blog, which I'll show at the end, comparing TOK to nature of science, which we'll go to later in the presentation. The Group 4 project has not gone. It's now, well, it's being changed into collaborative science project. So it's been sort of revamped, hopefully pumped a bit more life into something which perhaps some schools were not too positive about. In terms of the review, schools that liked the collaborative project, the Group 4 project, really do like it, and some schools don't. But I think as a science test, it's very important to emphasize that it is often a group activity. Collaboration is a key skill, and also increasingly subjects are becoming interdisciplinary in approach. So it's good that students have a sense of what they're doing in one particular subject can actually support and work with other subjects as well. So I think it's very justified in terms of being maintained. It also is written in a way that ESS students really will become hopefully more involved, because it wasn't compulsory in the previous guide. But I always thought it was a bit ironic that the one interdisciplinary subject didn't have to do the interdisciplinary project, but now they will. Practically, there was no great differences for teachers. You are encouraged to look at an issue of global concern. So perhaps looking at the International Panel of Intergovernmental Climate Change, or UNESCO, or indeed the sustainability goals from the UN, that they offer a good context for students looking at a question of global interest. Document, as indeed they had for the Group 4 project. So what stayed the same? Well, the PSRW is still there, but it's now called the Record of Experimental Programme, and it is only for internal use only, so you don't have to send anything to the IB. It's just important that we emphasise the practical nature of chemistry, and if you have a 5-year review for the IB or a 10-year review, they could ask you for a record of your practical programme. So it's important that you keep it up to date for that purpose. It's also good as a teaching tool just to remind yourself how balanced your programme is and how it can develop from one year to the next. Oliver, anything to add?
No, I think you've covered all that, Mike, nicely.
Global context is still in the book. Again, this will support the collaborative project that I've just mentioned, showing that chemistry does have a political, social, environmental context. And also, in the text, we try to also highlight some cutting-edge science that relates to what they're studying in the text. Key facts, they're still there and they're in bold. Again, useful for students to keep a record of the things that they're supposed to really understand. And hints for success. I think they were called examiner hints in the previous book, but I think it's not just about assessment, it's also about just learning and successfully understanding what you're doing, so students effectively making sure that they are able to address questions and understand fully. Again, that's supported in the chapter in the book, the end chapter, which talks about how to be successful in chemistry. So we talk about how you should study during the course, examinations, preparing for the examinations, and indeed in the examinations themselves. And while we're in the examination part, it's probably worth emphasising the change to assessment. Paper 3 has gone because, of course, the options have gone. And the first part of paper 3, which was about practical and data-based questions, that's being now put into paper 1, so paper 1 now has 2 elements to it. One is the multiple choice, which is part paper 1A, and paper 1B is the data-based questions, which effectively, so you've seen, what you'll see, practically speaking, is the first part of paper 3 now being in part of the second part of paper 1. Paper 2 is effectively the same, but the balance between the papers is quite even. So it means that the students will have effectively two sessions in the exams, and both equally balanced. So if they have a good day one day or a bad day the other day, hopefully it'll be balanced. In the book, there's these challenge yourself questions, which are there really just to probe and make sure that students really think about what they're reading and what they're understanding. A question here about the periodic table being in 3 dimensions and 2 dimensions and 4 dimensions.
We seem to have lost Mike briefly. Catherine, you're muted.
Yes, just Just one moment.
So
while
it looks
I
like
try to
we've-
get Mike forward. Sorry, Catherine, back
No,
online.
you go, Ilaria. You go, Ilaria.
Just one moment.
There's a couple of questions that are coming that we can have a look at while we wait for Mike to come back. So Paula asked or said, we've been asked if we can teach SL groups with the HL book. Are the SL questions labelled clearly in the HL book? So it's actually the other way round. The HL questions are labelled, so you can use the HL book to teach SL students, and we've labelled every single question and section that's for high level students only with a like HL label. So yes, you can do that. Oliver, I don't know if you've got any advice for teaching mixed classes using the HL book.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it's what I do at my current school, and I think that the way we've approached the HL book, as you've just pointed out, is to make it feasible to use that HL book for mixed classes, because all of the HL only content is labelled clearly, and actually in each chapter the SL content is covered before the HL content, so the actual structure and the layout is kind of designed so that you can teach SL and HL mixed classes together. Of course, the questions for individual teachers to think about is, well, when we're delivering just HL only content, what are SL students doing? And I guess that's kind of a bit more up to personal taste, but certainly the HL book is designed so that you can use it for mixed classes.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. And there was also a question about that I can answer about lab worksheets and whether they are included when you buy the book. So you can buy a print book that comes with an ebook code in the back of the book, like a scratch-off code, or you can only buy the ebook. So either way, you get access to all of the extra resources that we've included in the ebook, which includes the labs, some video links, and some auto-marked quizzes.
Hello,
that's
I'm
everything.
Sorry,
Oh, Mike's back.
Sorry, when did I cut off from? Hello?
Mike, no, sorry, got you. You were just talking about the different papers.
Okay, sorry about this. Okay, shall I share my screen again?
Yes, please.
Please.
Yeah.
Can I, while you're doing that, Mike, Paula just asked the question and added to her question about the end of chapter questions. And Paula, yes, the SL questions are kind of first, and then the HL only questions come at the end of those end of chapter questions. So it is structured in a logical way if you're teaching mixed classes, for example.
Okay, so we got to there, yes, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Mike.
Okay, I apologize to everybody for that. I heard a funny noise, but I didn't quite know what it was. Okay, so we're going through the examinations again, just to paraphrase what we said before. The assessment has changed. Paper 3 has gone, and the database part of paper 3 has been absorbed into paper 1, which now has got two parts: A, the multiple choice, and B, the database. And paper 2 is effectively unchanged, but the balance between the papers is quite balanced now. So the students don't necessarily have a big day and a less important day. They have two sessions, both of equal importance. Challenge yourself. Again, these are questions that are there to encourage students to think in more depth about what they've learned and what they've studied. Interesting facts, they are there to look at things of particular historical interest, or quirky facts that add to the colour, add to the flavour of the course, again, to engage students into fully understanding what they're doing. Worked examples of questions. So yes, there are different, and we know that teachers are very keen on having questions in the text, and I think we've added more questions in this edition to the previous editions. So you have worked examples, you've got exercises throughout the text, and then you've got practice questions at the end of each chapter. Those questions are effectively IB questions, or they may have been slightly adapted to take account of the new course, so that students have a good sense of what they'll be actually facing in the final assessment. So here you can see a question from chapter R2, R1, about measuring enthalpy changes. Ironically, it's a question that I actually wrote for the IB. we then pay the IB so we can use the same question, and then I can change it slightly to improve it. TOK. TOK, two parts into the book. One is that there are TOK boxes next to the text in each chapter, and there's also a TOK chapter at the end of the book. And you can see a little picture of the London Underground there, Mind the Gap, because to me TOK is about students minding the gap, being aware of what leaps they make in claiming to know something from what evidence or what experience they ever had. And I think chemistry does support TOK. So I don't think teaching TOK in chemistry is next to burden. I think in teaching, emphasizing links to TOK, you're actually supporting the students and you're actually making your course a little bit richer. Oliver, you may have views about this too, I imagine.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I think in terms of making it a richer course is quite important. And although I think a major barrier for a lot of teachers is actually not really having a clear understanding of what TOK is, what we mean by it. But actually, I think that the TOK chapter in this new edition particularly is quite nice at just exploring some of those underlying themes that you can integrate in your teaching of chemistry. And I'm a TOK coordinator at my current school. Through teaching TOK myself, I feel like I've enormously deepened my understanding of chemistry, and I'm beginning to see that kind of rub off on students the more time I spend integrating TOK into the course. I think it is really valuable. Like you said, that the boxes in the actual kind of content part of the books are quite helpful at probing some of those questions we might explore, and then the chapter on TOK explicitly is a good place to start for a teacher who maybe is not wholly confident in exactly what kind of things we're trying to look at in the TOK course.
Great. Okay, so again, this advice on the extended essay and some examples of possible approaches, and there's a little section on world study extended essays, which are becoming increasingly popular, I think, with students and schools as well. So as a chemistry teacher, you may be involved in supervising chemistry students, but also perhaps world study essays as well. Again, chemistry, the green chemistry part of the subject is underlined in the chapter at the end, as the subject is becoming increasingly aware of its the implications for the environment of what we do, and I think it's very important for future chemists to have that highlighted to them at the youngest possible age. The ebook has more on skills, as we've said. It also suggests for lab work, which I've illustrated. There are links to videos, auto-marked quizzes, and indeed there's a screenshot there of what's available. And in the ebook, you can actually buy the ebook, or you can buy the text book, which will have the ebook as part of the deal. So that's how you can actually work with the book. One thing in terms of the book I want to mention is you'll see that it's got the IB stamp in the top right-hand corner there. So we are an official IB book. That means that the IB have actually reviewed the book and they've endorsed what the content. So we've got the official engagement, official authorization of the IB. Also, I happen to know the person who reviewed it for us. He emailed me later and said that that's the book he would buy for his students. So I've got the unofficial accreditation as well. So that's nice to hear. And with the 5 authors this time, as opposed to 2 the previous. So we've got more experience, people with wider experiences, wider context. We've got people working in different parts of the world. Again, hopefully, so that the product has, I would say, if you like the previous book, you'll still like the new book, but it's been enriched by added perspectives and different experiences. And just went too far. The blog, which I mentioned at the beginning, there's a blog available. So Catherine's written a blog about changes in the program, which is there. The link is below. And Oliver has written something about TOK and nature of science as well. Oliver, do you want to add something to that? Hello?
Oliver, you're on mute.
So I had a group of people walking loudly past the door to this room. Yeah, I mean, in terms of a blog, it's worth checking out if you are interested in a possible distinction between kind of chemistry content, nature of science, and theory of knowledge. And I think that as a kind of quick overview, it's increasing conceptual breadth as we move from this kind of the granular concepts explored in the content. Nature of science, those kind of aspects as they're listed in the guide are kind of explorable across the science subjects. And then TOK is really the broadest of concepts related to knowledge that can be explored from science to maths to history to the arts, and actually kind of beyond the scope of the IB. So it's worth checking out the blog if you want a little bit of an idea of the distinction between them, and also some approaches, some practical approaches and advice to integrating them into your teaching.
Okay, so I've covered what I intended to plan to cover. So are there any questions?
There are a couple. Ilaria, if you could post the link to the, oh, Ilaria's on it. Ilaria's going to post some links in the chat to the blog post, etc., because somebody was asking about those. So there was a question about exercise answers and where you can find them. So when you log into to your ebook account, you'll see, as Mike showed in his screenshot, there's 3 tabs: student book, resources and exercises, and in that resources tab you will find a downloadable PDF of the answers, and it's got the answers to the exercises, the practice questions and the challenge questions, and there are also worked solutions because we know they were popular in the previous edition, so we've done that again. The extra digital content like the answers isn't live yet because we're just working on the final checks, but as soon as they are ready, they will be added to the ebook. I don't think we've got any other questions at the moment, so please do submit questions if you have any. There will be a follow-up email with a link to this recording, and there'll also be some links in that email about how to get in touch with us, how to get in touch with your local salesperson, etc. So please do look out for the email and share it with your colleagues.
And also, if you're interested in reviewing the books, free trials are available from our website. So I could add the link in chat. Just one moment. I'll do it in a second, but thank you very much for everybody who's attended today. I hope you've enjoyed this session. I certainly have. So thank you very much to Mike and Oliver for a very informative session. And I think this, oh, Catherine, there is another question for you, I think, in chat. If we order a copy of the higher level book now, will arrive before the end of June?
It should do. That. All the books are in stock in the warehouse. It kind of depends on where you are located, but it should, yes.
Thank you.
I've got a copy of the book here, if you can see it.
Oh, Mike's has arrived.
Beautiful.
And just
Beautiful.
to highlight the fact that, you know, one thing that Pearson books do is have the separate stand level books and the high level book. Again, it's up to which schools they want to encourage students to buy, but you know, for students just studying standard level, obviously for them it might be useful to have a book that's less heavy and content they don't actually need. So so that's why Pearson do it, I think, and it's quite a popular option for some students.
Absolutely. And here's the link to the page on our website where you'll be able to order your free trial if you wish to review the books. And I think this concludes our session today. So thank you very much again for attending. Just a couple of things before we go. An email will be sent to you with the link to the recording. The webinar recording will be available from our website. It's usually 24 to 48 hours after the end of the webinar. There will also be a link to a very short webinar survey in the email. We really would appreciate if you could complete it and let us know, our speakers, the great job they've done today. So this is all from us. Thank you very much for joining, and have a good rest of the day, and obviously rest of the week too. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.